I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Hey everybody, it's Chris Bumbray here again from JoBlo.com with a review of the eagerly anticipated Blade Runner 2049 from director Denis Villeneuve. Now, in Blade Runner 2049, Villeneuve's taken on a monster of a project that, even in the best of hands, would be nearly impossible to do right. Heck, Ridley Scott himself famously labored over various cuts of the 1982 original, only finding the right balance as recently as 2007, 25 years later, in his definitive final cut, although even that didn't prevent him from including 4 more cuts on the DVD Blu-ray set. If Villeneuve managed to make a film that lived up to the original, would modern audiences even get it? Let's not forget, the original was a theatrical flop, only gaining a cult following years later. In this one, a young Blade Runner played by Ryan Gosling is tasked with retiring the remaining Tyrell Court replicants, and has his worldview challenged when he uncovers a mystery dating back to one of his predecessors, Rick Deckard, of course played by Harrison Ford. Now, to his immense credit, Denis Villeneuve's created a film that's faithful in many ways to the original and doesn't play into the trappings of a modern blockbuster, with action used sparingly and the existential questions of the original once again emphasized. While flawed in some ways, it's also a film that, more than any others released this year, demands serious study and could actually improve upon return viewings, much like the original, which I must admit I hated when I first saw it, but then dozens of tries later it's now one of my favorite films. Weird, right? Blade Runner 2049 doubles down on the neo-noir aesthetic of the original. Early on, Ryan Gosling, who stars as our Blade Runner hero this time, recites a line from the 1944 Raymond Chandler adaptation Murder My Sweet, saying, "A black pool opened up at my feet. I dived in. It had no bottom." Gosling is ideal here as the noirish hero, with his square jaw and good looks hiding a more cerebral side that pays major dividends here. Known as K, he goes about his job in a brutal, unforgiving way, but in his dealings with his lover Joy, played by Ana de Armas, he shows a side arguably tenderer than Deckard even did in the original. As the movie goes on, he's plunged into a mystery that's given context by the first film, although as many have noted, it's not absolutely necessary to have seen it to get into this. It operates more or less as its own entity. While Harrison Ford's Deckard is a major character, you really learn only as much about him here as you need to know, although certainly acolytes the original will be pleased by the threads of continuity present. Juggling which cut Villeneuve is faithful to is also something he does especially well, with anyone who's seen the differences between the theatrical and the director's cut know isn't an easy thing to pull off. Both are very different. Gosling is superb as Kay, giving as nuanced a portrayal as ever, while Ford seems surprisingly game to dive right back into the world of a film he's notorious for hating, although he's also made it clear it was more the process of making the movie than the finished project that he disliked. He brings the right sense of weariness and maturity to Deckard. You believe he's the same guy, but also one shaped by the 30 years that have passed since the first. As far as the supporting cast goes, Arness gives the film a lot of soul, while Robin Wright is perfectly taciturn as Gosling's chief, more or less the same way M. Emmett Walsh was in the original. Jared Leto is also well cast to type as the new father figure to the replicants, with Sylvia Hoeks memorable as his attack dog henchwoman. The thing that's really going to get people talking about Blade Runner 2049 is, without a doubt, the stunning cinematography by Roger Deakins, which is probably the most masterful job he's done to date. He's a shoo-in for an Oscar this year, at least in my opinion. However, Blade Runner 2049 is not free of flaws. For one thing, at 163 minutes, just shy of 3 hours, the film is way too long. Now, I get that Villeneuve had a lot of ground to cover, but the padded running time is indulgent and could easily have been tightened up. He opts for a very languid, slow pace, which is fine, but also makes one nostalgic for the way Ridley Scott did something similar in just under 2 hours in the first film. I must also admit to being a bit underwhelmed by the score by Benjamin Walfish and Hans Zimmer. They sample Vangelis and go for the same sonic tone, but too much of the incidental music is familiar, like it could have just as easily been part of the Dunkirk score rather than Blade Runner. There aren't any new themes on the level of anything Vangelis did originally, and with him still alive, one wonders why he wasn't invited back in some capacity, as his score is as much a part of what makes the original great as anything else. Flaws and all, though, Blade Runner 2049 is undoubtedly one of the year's must-see cinematic events. It's imperfect, but there's enough going on here that I wouldn't presume to say I caught it all the first time, or fully appreciate what Villeneuve's done just yet. After all, it's Blade Runner. It's meant to be challenging, and that's exactly what this is. I give it a strong 8 on 10. Until next time, I'm Chris Bumbray for JoBlo.com.